My wife abandoned. Me in the hospital. The divorce. Couldn't stop my rise. The hospital. Lights hummed softly as machines. Breathed for me. My body was broken. My future uncertain. And then she walked in, not with tears. Not with fear, but with a lawyer and a smile that didn't belong in a room like that. She signed the papers beside my bed, leaned close, and whispered, "I can't be married to a man who has nothing." She left before the monitors stopped beeping. What she didn't know was that rock bottom isn't the end for every man. Some men don't break in silence. They rise in it. Viewers, what would you do if abandonment became the moment that forged your power? The ceiling above me was a pale, cracked white, stained by years of disinfectant and forgotten prayers. A single fluorescent light flickered, just enough to remind me that nothing in this room was stable, not my body, not my future, not the woman who was supposed to be sitting beside my bed. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the silence, a mechanical reminder that I was still alive, even if everything else had paused. My right arm was wrapped in thick white bandages, suspended by a sling that pulled at my shoulder whenever I breathed too deeply. Pain lived in my chest, dull and heavy, spreading every time I tried to shift. The doctors had used careful words earlier: complications, recovery, uncertainty, the kind of words that sound professional but carry no comfort. I had nodded through it all, pretending strength, because that was what I had always done. Strength was how I survived. The door opened softly. For a brief, foolish second, relief washed over me. I expected her scent before I saw her. That familiar mix of jasmine and expensive soap that used to follow her through our apartment. I imagined her face tight with worry, her hands already reaching for mine, her voice trembling as she asked how I felt. Instead, she stepped in like she was entering an office meeting. My wife, perfect posture, flawless makeup, hair styled as if this were any ordinary afternoon, closed the door behind her without rushing. She didn't look at the machines. She didn't look at the bruises creeping up my neck. Her eyes went straight to the chair beside my bed, then past it, as if she were already calculating how quickly she could leave. Behind her came a man in a grey suit, carrying a thin leather folder. Something in my chest tightened harder than the injury. "Hi," I said, my voice dry, weak, unfamiliar even to me. You're here." She nodded once. Not a smile. Not a tear. Just a nod, precise and controlled. "We won't take long," she said. The suited man cleared his throat and placed the folder gently on the small rolling table beside my bed, careful not to disturb the four-line. The sound of leather touching plastic felt louder than it should have been. I followed her eyes as she finally looked at me. There was no hatred there. No anger. What frightened me more was the absence of anything warm. It was the look someone gives a problem they have already solved. "I spoke with the doctors," she said. "They explained your condition." I swallowed. And I've made a decision. The heart monitor quickened slightly, betraying me. I tried to sit up straighter, ignoring the sharp protest from my ribs. "About what?" I asked, though something deep inside me already knew. She exhaled, as if preparing for an unpleasant but necessary task. "About us." The word "us" landed wrong, hollow and distant. The man in the suit opened the folder with calm efficiency. Papers slid into view, neatly stacked, already signed in one place. "This isn't the time," I said quickly. "We can talk later. I need you right now." Her lips pressed together, and for the first time, something close to irritation flickered across her face. "This is exactly the time," she replied. "I won't pretend anymore." She stepped closer to the bed, heels clicking softly against the linoleum floor. When she leaned in, I expected tenderness out of habit. Instead, her voice dropped, low and steady, meant only for me. "I can't be married to a man who is broken," she said. "Not physically. Financially. Socially. I didn't sign up to watch everything collapse." The words didn't hit all at once. They came slowly, each one finding its place, each one staying. "I'll recover," I said. "The doctors said it will take time, but This isn't about recovery," she interrupted. "It's about trajectory." She straightened and nodded toward the papers. Sign them. I stared at the documents, my vision blurring slightly. Divorce. Clean. Legal. Final. My name typed neatly beside hers, as if our years together could be reduced to matching fonts. You're leaving me, I said, not as a question, but as something I needed to hear out loud. Yes. The word was simple. Efficient. Final. The man in the suit placed a pen in my hand. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the effort it took not to beg. I had been many things in my life, overworked, underestimated, exhausted, but I had never been small. I would not start now. I looked up at her one last time. You won't stay, I said quietly. Not even tonight. She shook her head. I've already packed. The pen hovered above the paper. The machines continued their indifferent rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, another patient laughed, the sound drifting in like a cruel reminder that the world kept moving. I signed. She didn't watch me finish. She turned away before the ink dried, already reaching for the door. No kiss. No goodbye. Just the soft click of the handle and the silence that followed. When the door closed, the room felt larger, emptier, colder. I lay there alone, staring at the ceiling again, listening to the machines breathe for me, feeling something unfamiliar settle into my chest, not despair, not anger, but a quiet, dangerous clarity. This bed was where she thought my life ended. She was wrong. Night in the hospital had a way of stretching time until it felt cruel. The lights dimmed but never fully turned off, leaving everything, washed in a pale blue glow that made sleep difficult and thoughts impossible to escape. Nurses moved quietly, their shoes whispering against the floor, checking monitors, adjusting drips, then disappearing again as if they were never there. She didn't come back. I told myself I wasn't waiting for her. Yet every time the door opened, my chest tightened with a reflex I couldn't control. Each time it wasn't her, the disappointment arrived softer but deeper, settling somewhere beneath the pain medication. The days blended together. Physical therapy started early, brutal in its simplicity. Sit up. Breathe deeply. Move your fingers. Each small task felt like climbing a mountain with broken legs. Sweat soaked through my gown as I fought my body, gritting my teeth while a young therapist encouraged me with the forced cheerfulness of someone who had never had everything taken from them in one afternoon. Progress, she kept saying. You're doing great. I nodded, because nodding was easier than explaining that progress felt meaningless when the person you were fighting for had already walked away. On the fourth night, sleep finally broke through the haze of painkillers, only to drag me into memory. I dreamed of our apartment, of mornings when sunlight spilled across the kitchen counter while she drank coffee and complained about her day. In the dream, she turned to me and smiled like she used to, soft and real, and for a moment I forgot the papers, the lawyer, the door closing behind her. I woke up gasping. The heart monitor spiked. A nurse rushed in, calm but alert, asking questions I barely heard. When she left, the room returned to its hollow quiet, and the truth settled back in. I was alone. 2 days later, a woman in a dark blazer arrived during visiting hours. She introduced herself as a hospital case coordinator and pulled up a chair beside my bed with professional concern written across her face. We need to discuss your discharge plan, she said gently. I almost laughed. Discharge to where? She hesitated, flipping through her tablet. Your wife hasn't confirmed housing arrangements. My ex-wife, I corrected. The word felt strange but necessary. Her expression softened. I'm sorry. I stared at the window, at the city beyond it continuing without me. I'll figure it out. I always did. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed for the first time since she left. Not a message from her. Not even an apology disguised as politeness. It was an email notification from my bank. Account access restricted. I opened it with shaky fingers, scrolling through the explanation. Joint accounts frozen. Assets under review. Everything we had built together, what little there was, now locked behind legal language and signatures that were no longer mine. The timing was almost impressive. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay there listening to the hum of electricity in the walls, the distant sirens outside, the steady reminder of my own heartbeat, and somewhere between the beeping machines and the cold realization that I had been erased from my own life. Something shifted. I stopped asking why. Instead, I started counting breaths when the pain flared, counting steps during therapy, counting the seconds it took to sit up without help. Each number became proof that I was still moving forward, even if no one was watching. A week later, my younger sister finally came. She stood awkwardly in the doorway at first, eyes wide as she took in the machines, the bandages, the version of me she wasn't used to seeing. "Don't look at me like that," I said quietly. "I'm still me." She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and wrapped her arms around me carefully, as if afraid I would shatter. I felt her shoulders shake before I felt my own tears. "She left you," she whispered. "I know." Anger burned in her eyes. "She doesn't deserve." "Stop," I said gently. "She made her choice." And so had I, even if I didn't fully realize it yet. That evening, my attending physician came in, with a chart and an expression that didn't match the routine checkup tone. "There's something you should know," he said. "Your test results came back." I braced myself for bad news. More delays. More limitations. Instead, he smiled. "You're stronger than we thought. Recovery will be difficult, but your prognosis is excellent." The words didn't feel like victory. Not yet. But they felt like possibility. After he left, I stared at my reflection in the darkened window. Pale. Bruised. Thinner than I remembered. But my eyes were different. Clearer. Sharper. She had seen a man lying in a hospital bed and assumed that was the end of the story. She didn't see the nights I survived without her. The discipline forming quietly beneath the pain. The resolve hardening with every step forward. By the time the hospital discharged me, I walked out alone, carrying a single bag of clothes and something far heavier in my chest. Not heartbreak. Purpose. The first thing I noticed outside the hospital was how loud everything was. Cars rushed past without care, horns blared. People talked on their phones as if nothing in the world had ever paused. The sky was wide and indifferent, stretched above me like a reminder that life did not slow down, just because mine had nearly stopped. My sister helped me into her car, adjusting the seat so I could sit without pain. She asked questions on the drive, where I wanted to go, what I planned to do next, but I gave her vague answers. Not because I didn't trust her, but because the truth was still forming. I didn't know yet. Her spare room became my temporary world. A small bed, a narrow desk, a window that looked out over a parking lot where nothing remarkable ever happened. At night, I lay awake listening to unfamiliar sounds, reminding myself that this was survival, not failure. Pain dictated my schedule. Mornings began slowly, carefully, with stretches the therapist had taught me. Every movement was deliberate. Every breath counted. I marked progress in inches, not miles. 3 weeks after my discharge, a letter arrived. Not from my ex-wife. Not from a lawyer. From my former employer. The envelope was thin, official, and cold. I already knew what it said before I opened it. Medical leave had turned into extended absence. Extended absence had turned into liability. Liability had turned into termination. No ceremony. No conversation. Just another signature erasing me from something I had given years of my life to. I sat at the desk, the letter in my hands, feeling the familiar pressure in my chest, not pain this time, but anger, sharp and focused. They had waited until I was out of the hospital, long enough to look considerate, short enough to protect themselves. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer. Then I opened my laptop. I hadn't touched it since before the accident. The screen lit up slowly, reflecting my face back at me. Tired, but alert. I logged into an old email account, one I hadn't used in years, and began scrolling. Messages from people who once believed in me. Proposals I never followed up on. Ideas I had shelved because stability felt safer. I read them all, one by one, not with regret, but with curiosity. Back then, I had chosen security over risk. I had chosen a steady paycheck over my own instincts. I had chosen peace at home over ambition that made others uncomfortable. Now, there was nothing left to lose. My fingers moved across the keyboard carefully at first, then faster. I replied to one message, then another. I updated my resume, not with desperation, but with honesty. I wasn't looking for employment. I was looking for leverage. Days turned into weeks. My body grew stronger. I walked longer distances. I needed less medication. The mirror started to show someone I recognized again, not the man I was before, but someone harder, quieter. One afternoon, an email came through that stopped me. A former colleague. Someone who had left the company years earlier under circumstances no one talked about openly. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. If you're open to it, let's talk. We met at a small cafe near my sister's place. I arrived early, choosing a seat where I could see the door. Old habits returned easily. Control. Awareness. Preparation. He walked in 10 minutes later, older, sharper, carrying himself like someone who had learned from being burned. You look better than I expected, he said after we shook hands. I'm still standing, I replied. He smiled slightly. That's more than most. We talked for hours. About the company. About decisions made in back rooms. About opportunities that never reached the right people. He spoke carefully, but there was no bitterness in his voice, only clarity. You were underestimated, he said finally. They always saw you as reliable, not dangerous. I leaned back, absorbing the word. Dangerous. I'm building something, he continued. Quietly. And I need someone who understands how the system works from the inside. I didn't answer right away. I watched steam rise from my untouched coffee, thought about hospital ceilings, about signatures, about doors closing behind me. Tell me more, I said. That night, back in the spare room, I couldn't sleep. Not from pain, not from fear, from anticipation. I began outlining plans. Not dreams, plans, timelines, risks, resources. I treated my life the way I used to treat projects at work, with precision and patience. My ex-wife's name surfaced occasionally in my thoughts, but without the sting it once carried. She had stepped away when the ground felt unstable. She had mistaken silence for weakness. She had not seen this version of me. By the end of the 3rd month, I had committed fully. No announcements, no declarations, just action. The world had moved on without me. I was moving differently now. Success did not announce itself when it arrived. It slipped in quietly, like a habit forming, like discipline becoming instinct. There were no dramatic wins at first, no moments that begged to be shared. Just long hours, careful decisions, and a growing sense that I was no longer reacting to life but shaping it. We worked out of borrowed spaces and empty conference rooms, wherever we could think clearly without being seen. My former colleague, now my partner, handled outreach and negotiations. I focused on structure, systems, weak points others ignored because they were comfortable. My body continued to recover alongside the work. Mornings started before sunrise, not because I forced myself to wake early, but because my mind refused to sleep. I walked miles without realizing it, thinking through strategy while the city yawned awake. Each step felt like a small rebellion against the version of me left behind in that hospital bed. The first contract came unexpectedly. Modest, but clean. It proved the model worked. The second followed faster. Then a third. Momentum grew, slow but undeniable, like pressure building beneath the surface. I kept my name off everything public. Not out of fear, but out of patience. There is power in being invisible when people believe they already understand you. One afternoon, while reviewing projections, I saw her name for the first time in months. Not in my inbox. Not in my thoughts. On a legal document. She had filed a motion related to asset division. Confident and aggressive, assuming my circumstances had not changed. Her attorney requested disclosures, timelines, proof of income. I read it once, then again, and smiled. I responded through my lawyer, calm and precise. No emotional language. No defense. Just compliance, with a delay. Delays create curiosity. Curiosity creates mistakes. Weeks passed. More contracts closed. Our influence widened. People started asking questions about the firm behind the results. I stayed in the background, attending meetings only when necessary, letting others underestimate me the way they always had. Then the call came. My ex-wife's voice was cautious, measured, unfamiliar. "I didn't expect you to answer," she said. "I didn't expect you to call," I replied. A pause. I imagined her somewhere comfortable, surrounded by things she believed defined success. "There are discrepancies," she began, "in the filings." "Are there?" I asked. "Yes. Your reported income doesn't align with your recent activity." I leaned back in my chair, sunlight cutting across the room. Recovery can be surprising. She didn't laugh. "I think we should meet," she said. "To talk." "For what purpose?" "To clarify things." I considered it. Not because I needed to, but because timing mattered. "Send it through the lawyers," I said. "That's what they're for." Her composure cracked just enough for me to hear it. "You've changed." "No," I said evenly. "You just never knew me." After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long moment. There was no triumph in it. No revenge. Just confirmation. The following month, our work crossed a threshold. A major client. A partnership that shifted perception. My name appeared on official documents now. Impossible to ignore, attached to numbers that forced respect. I saw it then, the truth I had been building toward without naming. My rise did not begin after the divorce. It began because of it. I was no longer driven by proving anything to her or anyone else. I was driven by alignment between who I was and what I was willing to tolerate. The final legal meeting took place in a glass-walled office downtown. She arrived confident, composed, dressed for control. When she saw me standing beside my attorney, not weakened, not desperate, but steady, something flickered across her face. Surprise. The conversation was short. Facts are efficient when they can no longer be denied. The settlement shifted. Terms adjusted. Reality asserted itself without raising its voice. When it ended, she stood, gathering her things slowly. "I didn't think you would survive this," she said quietly. I met her gaze. "You weren't meant to." I walked out without looking back, the city reflecting off the glass around me, carrying the weight of everything I had earned in silence. The divorce could not stop my rise. It only revealed it. The morning the divorce was finalized, the city looked ordinary. No dramatic sky. No sense of closure written into the clouds. Traffic moved as it always had. People rushed past with coffee in their hands, unaware that a chapter of my life had just been sealed permanently behind me. That ordinariness felt right. Real endings rarely announce themselves. I arrived early, not out of nerves, but out of habit. The discipline I had built during recovery never left me. I stood by the window of the courthouse hallway, watching my reflection in the glass. I looked stronger now, broader in the shoulders, steadier in the eyes. The scars were still there, hidden beneath clothing, but I no longer thought of them as damage. They were proof of survival. She arrived 10 minutes late. Her heels echoed down the corridor, sharp and deliberate, like she needed the sound to remind herself she still mattered. When she saw me, she slowed, visibly adjusting her posture, recalibrating. This version of me did not fit into the story she had rehearsed. We exchanged polite nods. Nothing more. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings were brief. Names read aloud. Documents confirmed. Signatures acknowledged. Years of marriage reduced to procedural language spoken by people who had never known us. When the judge declared it final, there was no wave of emotion, no release of tension, just a clean line drawn between past and present. Outside, she stopped me. "I never thought you'd come out of this like this," she said, her voice softer than I expected. "You were different back then." I considered her words carefully, not because they mattered, but because honesty had become important to me. "I was quieter," I said, "not smaller." She nodded, as if understanding too late was still understanding. "I thought leaving was survival." "For you," I replied. "It was." She waited, perhaps for bitterness, for accusation, for some final emotional transaction. It never came. I shook her hand politely and walked away. That afternoon, I returned to the office. The team was already there, working, focused, moving with confidence. The company no longer felt fragile or experimental. It felt real, sustainable, ours, in a meeting room overlooking the city. I listened more than I spoke, watching ideas flow without ego. This was what I had been building toward without realizing it. Not just success, but alignment. Work that reflected who I was becoming, not who I had been pretending to be. Later that evening, alone in my apartment, a place chosen intentionally, furnished simply, I poured a glass of water and sat by the window. The city lights blinked on one by one, indifferent and beautiful. I thought back to the hospital room, the machines, the pen in my trembling hand, the door closing behind her. That moment had felt like an ending. It had been a beginning, not the kind that comes with applause or validation, but the kind that demands responsibility. Responsibility for my body, my choices, my future. I had learned something few people do without losing everything first. Abandonment reveals truth. It shows you who leaves when you are weak and who stays when there is nothing to gain. It strips away illusion and replaces it with clarity. And clarity, when acted upon, becomes power. I did not rise despite her. I rose because I finally stopped shrinking to make someone else comfortable. As the night settled in, my phone buzzed with a message from a new client confirming a long-term partnership. I read it once, acknowledged it, and set the phone down. Success no longer needed to be celebrated loudly to feel real. I stood, stretched, and looked out over the city one last time before turning off the lights. I was no longer the man abandoned in a hospital bed. I was the man who walked away whole. And nothing, no betrayal, no divorce, no silence, could ever take that from me again. Drop a comment. What would you do if the person you loved abandoned you at your lowest? Like, subscribe, and share to support powerful real-life inspired storytelling.